Welcome to the Recovery Stories podcast, bringing you stories of hope, healing, and triumph over the bondage of addictions, mental health struggles, trauma, and dysfunctional family systems. Our courageous storytellers have chosen to live their journey out loud in order to show others that they don't have to suffer in silence. The stories you will hear are raw, real, and may involve graphic and triggering content. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's Rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or are ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098. Or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
Welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer and I'm your host. I am absolutely so thrilled. It is our 100th episode of this podcast, and we're celebrating this huge milestone with an extra special guest who uses her platform to educate, break stigma, and shine a light on the pathway to hope for those who may be struggling by speaking out about mental health, addiction, and recovery. She's an American dancer and television host who's fondly revered by many on ABC's Dancing with the Stars. Not only was she the first female professional to win the show, but she was also the first professional to win twice consecutively, and has participated in 26 seasons. Welcome, the one and only Cheryl Burke.
Hello, how are you? Congratulations on your 100th episode.
Thank you so much. We're thrilled to have you here today, and let's just jump right in. First and foremost, I couldn't help myself if I didn't ask you this first question. Just wrapping the last season of Dancing with the Stars, what were some of your favorite highlights from this past season?
Well, I mean, the fact that I have called it quits now, so that is a huge highlight for me, right? This was my official farewell. I wouldn't like to say retirement because it sounds like I'm like literally retiring, which is definitely not the case. It's just the beginning of my career. However, it was beautiful to be able to experience my last season with Sam Champion, who is a dear friend of mine. And then also always, I mean, it's not just one favorite experience or thing on this last season. It's just my family, right? I moved here to Los Angeles and thinking I was doing Dancing with the Stars for the rest of my life. But like anything, it doesn't always last forever, right? So it is all I know. And however, I am very much looking forward, I guess you could say, to the future and what that entails for me. So
that's awesome. I love that answer. I oftentimes talk to friends, colleagues, people that we're working with in recovery, talking about how, if you ever start getting bored with life, just think about what firsts you have left. Firsts are exciting. And it sounds like, you've done a lot of amazing things, but now that when something ends, that means you've got a lot of firsts to delve into. So
yes, and it's scary, but you know what is life without diving headfirst into that uncertainty? Because life is uncertain until, we don't know what's going to happen 2 minutes from now. Really, if you were to really sit down and think about it, all we can do is try and live our life in this present moment, which is right this second.
Isn't that the truth? It's something that I think every human being can benefit from that practice. But for those of us who have walked the path of recovery or are trying to, it's one of the most powerful tenets of our program that keep us going.
Exactly.
From minute to minute, hour to hour.
Yeah,
for sure. So talking about recovery, life, family systems, I want to go back, if you will, just to your early days of hearing about your life as a child, and move forward chronologically.
Sure. What parts? Because there's a lot of layers to this onion.
Yes, there are. Okay, so I think my favorite way to have this conversation is what comes to your heart when I ask this question. So
yeah.
If you were to step back and put yourself in Cheryl as a little girl and describe your life from some of your earliest memories, the good, bad, how would you describe that for us? Where you were?
We can start with
what
that.
Your family
My first memory, I mean, that is pretty clear for me. My first memory was of my father actually with another woman. that is my very first memory. It's not all like my grandma picked me out of the crib and we were swinging on the
Wow.
swings. It's definitely not like that. And that question is interesting because I've actually asked a lot of my friends, and a lot of my friends and family members' first memory is of something that is, I guess, of a more happy part of their life, right? Like the happy memory. I
Mm.
remember, I asked one of my fellow dancers, coworkers on Dancing with the Stars, and it was literally my mom pushing me on the swing and like doing all of that, and mine was seeing another woman who was naked with long black hair. And at the time my parents were separated, but I had no idea, obviously, and I wanted my dad to change the channel because it was a commercial, and I was watching Sesame Street in his brown leather chair. I remember it as if it was yesterday. And he wasn't hearing me, so I went to go find him, and the door was like cracked open a little, and they were full on, intimate.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was my very first memory. And, I think obviously, as a kid, my mom thought I was deaf. I didn't talk a lot at all, actually. And she took me to a hearing specialist who then said to her, no, ma'am, your daughter is going through PTSD and trauma. And my parents divorced at a young age when I was 2 years old. Now that, my dad has passed away, rest in peace. But, it was the best decision, because if I was raised within this turmoil of the environment that unfortunately my mom and dad, had to live through and also then live apart. Thank God for that, because I don't think I'd still be sitting here today if they forced their relationship and tried to make
Mm-hmm.
things work more than they already did. My mom remarried a lovely man, my stepdad, who I call dad to this day. And he is an amazing man, and I'm happy to have mainly been raised by him as well. Another thing that comes to mind was I got sexually molested when I was a little girl by a hired, I guess, help man that would drive us around. Us meaning my older stepsister. So my stepdad had a previous marriage and had a daughter with his ex-wife, and the same went for, obviously my mom. So, we both got sexually abused. However, I'm not going to speak for my sister, but for me, that was an interesting time. My mom had also hired a full-time nanny, a separate one from the Philippines, who basically was a live-in nanny, because my mom had developed her startup at that time. Actually, she started a company in '84 when I was in her stomach. But she has, she grew up in poverty. She has that rags to riches story, and she created a nursing company that she actually just sold. But like, she really was focused on trying to put food on the table because she didn't want to ask money from her ex-husband.
Mm-hmm.
And she wanted to make it in this world, and her goal was to be able to provide. And so that's what she did, which required her not to be at home raising me, so I was
Mm-hmm.
definitely raised by two people. One I considered like my mother. She only spoke Tagalog, which is the Filipino language. And so I would speak to her in English and she would speak to me in Tagalog, and I can still actually understand the language to this day. So when my mom wants to talk shit about me, not sure if you can swear on this podcast, but
Oh, you can. It's fine.
okay. I can understand everything still. So I'm grateful for that. And I'm also grateful for her because she really played that like fairy godmother role, that I needed. But
Yeah.
the dark side of all that was the other side of, the person who was driving us around, because my nanny wasn't able to drive. And so that was interesting, and that was traumatizing, and that was scary for me, because I also
Mm.
testified against him when I was 9 years old, and then realized that I wasn't the only one, obviously. And, the more I talk about it, the more healing it has, provided, as far as, not trying not to pretend to talk about someone else's story. It's like really feeling the feelings, and it's always different every time I bring it up, but I
Mm-hmm.
do feel there's one consistency when it comes to just being your authentic self and not worried about what other people are going to say. Because at the end of the day, what I've learned just recently is that my past does not define me. It's just a part of who I am. And I think that has really helped with my sobriety as well.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned, it is the importance of being able to process, and deal with the trauma, but also not shut it out. Just
Yeah.
because we've processed it doesn't mean that we don't have the opportunity to, and maybe it's not for everybody to, share their trauma with others,
No,
publicly and what have you.
no,
But,
it's not.
but yeah, but it can be very healing for in cases where, it has been processed effectively and,
Exactly. And it also can be healing for other people who have had similar
yes,
experiences. And that is the main reason I tell my story. I don't
yes,
tell my story purely based off of, oh, well, it helps me. No, I know for a fact it helps so many people who feel alone.
right.
And I think that is where you want to avoid at all costs. You don't want to fall down that rabbit hole of feeling like you're the only person on this planet who feels a certain way. Because at the end of the day, yes, there's different levels of trauma. Yes, absolutely. There are different scenarios. But at the end of the day, it helps to know that there is someone out there who has struggled and who may not be able to have a
Hmm.
platform that I've been blessed with, or that have not been able to have a voice behind the trauma. And I think that if I was, when I was young, I wish I had someone that told their story that
Hmm.
I happened to listen to back in the day, because that would have helped me a lot as well.
That makes so much sense. And I a kind of another note, and then we'll move on from this. But an observation that I have is one that it wasn't talked about in decades past.
No.
And we hit this movement where it was okay for people to be vocal and
Right.
it was encouraged and what have you. And I feel like the pendulum in the recent couple years has swung in a certain way where there's huge factions of us and people and helpers and healers and that are working to break stigma and encourage people to come out of the darkness with their problems and seek help and keep let their secrets out, and find healing. But there's also just a lot of voices out there saying, just talking about how overwhelmingly like that there's, the whole Me Too movement and
Mm.
everything is just gone way too far and all of this stuff. And that's where I think that if I were a young person right now experiencing or having had experienced something in recent past, I would be questioning whether or not I could be vocal or honest about it because of the anti voices out there saying
Mm.
that everybody's making false claims now and what have you. And so that's where it's like, it has not lost its importance.
But that's the problem, I believe, with society today, is that we don't believe people when they tell their story.
Exactly.
And that is
Yes.
that is really discouraging. And I know for a fact that that still obviously happens. And I also know for a fact, though, that most of the population probably is living in denial as well, and may also not want to, because of all the trauma we've just gone through as a collective when it comes to the
Mm.
pandemic. No one wants to hear anything when it comes to, they only want to hear happy things. However, we have a choice in life whether we want to tune
Hmm.
into a podcast like this or not. Right. And this is also the beauty in a way of social media. It's like you can pick and
Hmm.
choose. However, whatever you say and whatever we all do, no matter what, we've all experienced some type of trauma regardless. And now we can say we've all experienced it through this pandemic. Whether that have affected you consciously or not is irrelevant.
Hmm.
This was a huge shock to the system. And I think that the only way is through in general.
Absolutely. Yeah. I heard somebody say, the only way to thrive is to go through whatever. There's no going around it. If you want to
No.
truly thrive, it's straight through. You got to
And if
feel
you
it. You
do
got to
go,
own it.
exactly, sorry to interrupt you, but if you do go
You're good.
around it, it's going to affect you in a physical
Mm.
way, and it's not going to be pretty. And I know a few people that I'm very close with that it has currently is affecting them. Memory loss, Alzheimer's, being diagnosed with all these horrible diseases that there are no cures for because of the mere fact, and I strongly vouch whether there's science that proves this. I'm pretty sure there is. But like, if you don't feel your feelings and you numb, whether that be through alcohol, different substances, or just productivity, for example, it's going to come back at you tenfold, and it's just not going to be a pretty sight.
Amen. You said it, and it's so true. I could not agree with you more.
Yeah.
Well, so moving from a little bit of the darker side, let's talk about some of what brought you joy as a child.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of your hobbies, and when was it that you got into dancing, and how and why?
Well, I wasn't really necessarily book smart. My mom noticed that at a very young age for me, but I was very much into any other curricular activities other than sitting at a desk and doing homework. My mom, I'm grateful and blessed that she was able to, really be able to end up making enough money to support me in my different passions in life. One being obviously dancing. Dance was the one thing I never complained about, but I was involved in every extracurricular activity you could possibly think of. My mom always wanted to dance when she was a little girl. However, her parents could never afford it. Ballroom dancing came up when I literally developed at a very young age, at 9 years old, and I just didn't look the same, right? So I definitely had the same body as I do now when I was 9. Yes, that is a true fact. And it was just something that I just was bored with. And I knew that I wanted to dance. I just didn't know what type of dance, nor was I really introduced to anything. So my stepdad and my mom wanted to do a family type sport, and golf wasn't the one. So they tried ballroom dancing, and they said, why don't you come with us to a ballroom dance competition? And I thought that was only for old people, because that's what you associate ballroom dancing with, is like cotillion and waltz and old people.
Right.
And so then I saw we went to a local dance competition in the Bay Area where I'm from. And I saw kids my age dance, and it was so cool and it was so exciting. And as I am, an addict, I take things either all or nothing, and that's just my personality. And so that's what I did with ballroom. And I wanted to always go to the next level. I wanted to be a world champion. I wanted to be the best at what I did. And I sacrificed a lot. I sacrificed my whole life as a teenager. Never really experienced like summer camp. Never really had a lot of friends. Got into relationships at a young age because I could only handle maybe one other person on top of my dancing career, because we lived like Olympians. I would be living in Europe every summer. That was my summer camp. And at a very young age, I traveled at 13 years old. I was living in England for months at a time by myself with my dance partner. My mom was still running her company. And yeah, we had chaperones and all of that. But still, it's like, in order to, in my mind at that time, it was ingrained, and it is still probably is very valid in the ballroom industry. You have to dedicate your whole life. There isn't just half-assing anything when it comes to wanting to be an expert in something.
So it's interesting to me as I think about that from the psychological standpoint of just the normal psyche, but developing adolescent, and then also from like someone who identifies as a recovering addict later. Would you say so you have got like there's a fine line between a really heavy work ethic and overperforming to numb out?
100%. I'm really good at both.
And it's like,
that's my new drug of choice. No, I'm kidding.
Right. So it's one of those things that's sneaky too, right? Because it can disguise itself as I'm being productive, I'm being responsible, I'm being, doing all these things that you get social reward for.
Yes.
From your parents and coach, whatever, and so would you say that was your first form of unhealthy coping that you used to manage your emotional regulation?
I think it started from when I got molested. Really, I think that for me, in order to survive that, I was constantly, and I'm still working on it, because that's what I do unconsciously, is I live in fight, flight, or freeze. that is something that is very easy for me to tap into. And most of my life has been lived like that because I did have to protect myself. I am a huge advocate of therapy. Been in therapy since God knows when I could remember. I was 4 years old, and then I decided to continue on when I moved here to LA. But mind you, I didn't touch a drink until I moved here to Los Angeles when I was 21. I lived like an Olympian. Like I said, there was no room to eat a hamburger, let alone drink a vodka, soda, whatever the hell your poison of choice is. But there was no fun, no such thing as fun. So moving here to Los Angeles was definitely was the start of that. But rewinding back to what your question was, I could have been that, but really I had to also understand that my mom was supporting this and she wanted results. So there was that. I had the ultimate dance mom, and I also had to, and also that was that's how I was raised. I saw my mom, who's not an addict. I saw her fight for her life. She came from poverty. I definitely didn't come from poverty, thanks to her. However, she only works one way, and that is all or nothing as well. So you are who you're raised by unless you consciously want to change the pattern.
Ooh, that's really good. It's really true in a very simple way of putting it, though.
It's not simple.
Well, what you just said.
Totally. In a sound bite. Yeah, you are. Really, there's such thing as ancestral trauma, big time,
My gosh. Well, and that makes sense that, from the, your mom sacrificing, what she did to make things, make the life for you. I think that totally makes sense that you wanted to perform and succeed for her. So moving on. Well, first of all, I just have to say that you're one of the, at 100 episodes, talking to so many people. I don't only, because I work for a huge treatment company, and we help people get sober all the time. But talking through people's stories, I've talked to a lot of people, and it is not often that I talk to somebody who says my parent cared enough and was informed enough to use their resources to put me in help. Get me therapeutic help at a young age.
Yeah.
So kudos to mom.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that you saw the benefit from it and then decided that you wanted to stay there. So
I don't know if that's the exact story. However, there was a time when I was here in Los Angeles and I was like, is this it? This is it to life. And my friend, and I'm grateful for her as well, advised maybe I go see a therapist. And I was like, oh yeah, that thing. I remember therapy. And I don't remember it though, because again, I was in fight, flight, or freeze. And that whole timeline of my life is quite blurry. And I could be saying the timeline completely wrong, as I know that is normal when there's trauma involved. However, I had to testify against him in court, and there's all that as well. And I'm pretty sure, though my mom may not go to therapy herself, love you, Mom, she knew what the right thing was to do, and she is a nurse.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
From the medical perspective. So you've touched on a couple things, and I feel like I've heard sound bites of you talk about this before, but I want to ask you, did being a dancer, you look at yourself all the time.
Yeah.
It's, really common, especially from the female side.
Yeah.
Maintaining a certain weight, body image. Did you struggle in any certain ways with that leading up to, or even through Dancing with the Stars through today with the body dysmorphia, or
still struggling with it? Absolutely. It is, I think I just couldn't put words to it when I was competing, but yes, I had weigh-ins. My coach expected me to be a certain weight. And obviously, I am a curvy woman. I have hip bones that will, no matter how much weight I lose, will always be there, unless if I get it like smashed, and then like, God knows, who knows, I would never be thinking that, though I just did. But, it's really interesting because yes, we are in the mirror all the time. We're also comparing all the time. We're also being judged all the time. And obviously, I would say, though people may not want to admit it, but when it comes to the dance world, I would say most of us struggle, especially as women, when it comes to weight. But let me speak for myself. As far as body dysmorphia goes, it didn't help at that time. I grew up in front of people's eyes in their living rooms, right? I started when I was 21. I'm 38. My body changed. My hormones changed. I actually, I remember right before the season premiered, this was like season, 15 or something, 14, I decided to stop birth control thinking I was going to get snatched and lose weight because that's what normally happens, right? You would think. I retained 15 pounds of water weight, 1.5, overnight, like so fast. It felt like that.
Oh, wow.
And then I was on the cover of every tabloid you can possibly think of, saying that I was too fat for television. Now that specific event that happened and that followed me for a solid year and a half, 2 years, is still with me today. I think that it has gotten worse in a way through my sobriety because I am clear-headed, right? Like I was able to kind of drink through that pain, but this pain is the most, I would say, lingering one that I have yet to really say, okay, I'm a recovering body dysmorphia person. I don't know how to say that. But yeah, it is going to be like my sobriety. It's one day at a time. And I think I've made as far as just that goes, though there's many reasons, but me deciding to stop continuing to be judged, continuing to compare, continuing to live in front of a mirror constantly. Though, I don't plan on stopping as far as a television series goes or being on TV, but shoving my ass into dance costumes, going into fittings, doing certain moves to make sure that I don't have any back rolls on my back. Like there's certain things, right, that like I will obsess about and it will dictate my mood if I don't feel good in my own skin. And however, what I'm learning is that does not come from what you see in the mirror, because what I see is not right. It's not true. That's why it's called body dysmorphia. And I just remember once recently, I was looking at old pictures and I was like, oh my God, I was so skinny then. And I thought I was fat regardless. Like there was no way of switching that mentality of mine, though I know I'm getting better because I'm just able to hold myself accountable and at least admit certain things that I never did before. I would say that maybe a lot of my drinking and was maybe thinking that, oh, I'll be full after a few vodka sodas and I won't have to consume food.
Oh, yeah. Heck yeah. I think that, oh gosh, this is another one of those things that being open and transparent is so powerful from the eating it's the world of eating, body dysmorphia, you name it. It's like putting a label on it and calling it one thing versus the other is really difficult because it's all wrapped up into one thing. It's catering what you're putting into your body or how you're ingesting things in order to try and manipulate and control survive, but manipulate and control the perception of what you think you should and are looking like. And what I think is really interesting that we're finding is that so many more people struggle with this than is really publicized.
Yeah.
Or, in America, we talk about weight all the time. Every other advertisement you see is like a weight loss this, a weight loss that. And everybody jokes about how America is the obese country, and makes comments about that. But there's a truth that I feel like is very under talked about, and that is one that there is so much dysfunction when it comes to people and their body image. I'm speaking as one of those people. I think that I've never talked to somebody who said I struggled with body dysmorphia, and I have never, I hit a point where I had enough therapy that I've never had that
you're like recovered. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, I'm a recovering person from alcoholism, and I don't think that I'll ever be recovered. I have to, maintain.
Of course.
And so, but I think that
falls under that's a broad umbrella, alcoholism. I suffer from the same disease. It's like, it's not just that, people.
Right.
Right. Like it's an ism. It's an ism. Right. And it really isn't one way or the other. It's not black or white. And that's another thing I've been learning is that nothing is. It's not just one thing. It's a bunch of shit that we probably may have not hit on ever or may
Oh,
never. But
so
Jesus,
true.
let's go back to like the ancestral trauma. It really does, go back to that.
Mm-hmm. It really does.
It's
Well,
interesting, though. I don't believe addiction is hereditary, at all. Even though my father suffered from it, and he was an alcoholic.
you
However,
mean for you, you don't think that
I
like
don't
you
think
have the
it's.
gene?
I don't think in general. I believe that.
Really?
I don't know. There's many people I know that are addicts that don't know of any person in their bloodline that was ever an addict.
Yeah.
But that's just my own
That's interesting.
belief.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, we definitely know what it looks like for sure and how it manifests itself
Yes.
and the solutions for, you know, and that it's no respecter of how much money we have and how
Right.
much what our
Right.
status
No.
is and
No.
all that stuff.
Nope. It's like assholes. We all have one.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, okay, wait. So, did you say you do or do not have family history?
I do, but I know people that do not, that are
Right.
addicts.
Okay. Gotcha. And so, as far as I always like to ask this question because I think it's interesting. For me, I had a skewed perception of alcohol and drugs growing up because I grew up in such a conservative household. Like, when you were raised, how did your parents present to you, that conversation from what you understood about alcohol and drugs? When you went into adulthood, what was your adolescent understanding of that world?
There was no conversation, but none of it. So my mom comes from the Asian culture, right? She's Filipina, and they
Hmm.
don't talk about that type of stuff. We don't talk about that. The vulnerability is not necessarily defined as courageous. It is the opposite. My mother, let's not forget too, she was in, very much 24 hours involved in this startup company. Then I
Hmm.
was raised by my Filipina nanny, who was very old school in that sense, definitely didn't talk about anything. And so I turned to my older friends who were like, played like mommy figures, right? So, but when it comes to sex and it comes to drugs, alcohol, all of it, no, there was no conversation with me about it because that was like that was not necessarily something we talk about. Like it's really
Hmm.
hard for I'm not sure how familiar you are with just the Asian culture in general. Like, showing feelings, crying is not accepted. And it wasn't accepted, it wasn't shown as much in my family either. Though my mom is Filipina. But then again, my real dad, they didn't work out, they divorced. My stepdad, he is, and I'm grateful, he's a kind man. However, when it comes to
Hmm.
confrontation, he runs the other way, like most people do. No one wants to confront
Right.
anything, let alone take accountability, let alone, like, but he's the sweetest man in the world, and I'm grateful for him. But when it comes to life lessons, it was pretty much me on my own figuring it out. And I think with that came early mistakes. I lost my virginity when I was 13. I, went to Planned Parenthood. Thank God for Planned Parenthood when I had some mishaps. And I learned that way.
Wow. Yeah, no, I did not know that about Asian culture. And, it's interesting that you share that and that, so your mom sent you to therapy, which when I think about therapy, I think about emotions and getting raw and vulnerable. And
Well,
so,
that was the right
do you,
thing to do when someone has gotten molested at such a young
right,
age and just
right.
finished testifying against this man, facing him in court. I believe this was most likely, it's textbook, right? However, it didn't last. I mean, it's not like I continued on through when I was able to make my own decisions, which is what, 18 years old.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
Dance was my therapy. Movement was my therapy. However, there's nothing like talking about it, I think. Though it's hard for me still to this day. I have two therapists. I have my somatic therapist, who is it's a lot easier for me to explain where I'm feeling something in my body because I'm very aware of this, my body, my this thing right here.
For those who haven't, I love somatic therapy, by the way. So, okay, for those who have never heard of it before, just brief. Could you do your brief explanation of like what that is for
Yeah,
what you do?
sure. Somatic therapy, for anyone interested in listening to this, is basically for those that, and I know a few people who don't want to necessarily talk about it or who can't talk about it. There are other resources out there, whatever that may be. There's different types of therapists. There's EMDR. There's also somatic. There's cognitive. There's talk therapy. And then there are other ways of meditating and all of that, right? It's just like one big bunch of piles together of resources. Now, for me, because I'm a dancer, I have always been aware of my body. Even when my mom thought I had a hearing impairment, like I always was an observer who felt everything, regardless of if I was able to put it into words. So when it comes to somatic, what the session looks like with me and my therapist is, we talk about something that let's say I feel anxiety that comes up. Where in my body do I feel the anxiety? It comes from Dr. Peter Levine. He went to South Africa, studied animals in the wild, and realized these animals don't, yes, they live in fight, flight, or freeze, and they do that for survival as humans. However, they don't hold on to trauma, which therefore means they don't ever go through PTSD because of the mere fact that they feel the feeling, they locate it in their bodies, they shake it out like a dog does. You see how dogs shake out. They're shaking out trauma so that they don't necessarily have to deal with the after effects of holding in the trauma. They don't hold in anything. And we are very much like that if we could actually practice it, which is interesting.
Yes, it is. Thank you for sharing that. I think that was a very eloquent way of just describing it. So I love that you went into your tools that you're using, and I want to step back for just a second. You mentioned briefly earlier, late teen years, early 20s, moved to LA because you.
No, I moved to LA 21. When I was 21, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So okay. I still had my whole competitive career, and I went to high school, graduated from high school, but at the same time was traveling Europe, all over the world, competing still, doing the circuits and competing, going through partners, different partners. Normally when you're with a partner, you're with the partner. However, mine was a bit of a unique situation because my partner wasn't like a childhood partner that our parents put together, which is a lot of how partnerships develop in the ballroom world. It was like my mom was sponsoring them because they were coming from Denmark. My coach recommended that I try out with this guy. My mom would he would stay in a room in our home, and my mom would literally sponsor him through her company and, make it so that he had a visa. And so I had a few of those, right? And I would live a double life. So I lived my high school life, which was really much, I guess it was very much all about one person, and I was in an abusive relationship, both physically and mentally. That was my definition of a man. I talk a lot about it when I did the interview with Red Table Talk, and we talk a lot about, trauma bonding and all of that. And when you're raised in a certain environment, you see certain things. My first memory cut to, that was my definition of love, being abused as a kid. There was nothing as far as really owning and respecting yourself that was never really taught, right? Like I only knew love equaled abuse, love equaled all of this emotional roller coaster of a ride. So that was my version. So I went looking for that, and I was in two of those types of relationships through high school. And then I also had my ballroom life, and no one knew about it because my boyfriend at the time didn't allow it, didn't want to know about it, because that included me literally dry humping somebody else, right? And so obviously that brought up feelings of insecurity from somebody who is a narcissist, so that was interesting. And then as soon as I graduated from high school, I wanted to really pursue ballroom dancing. I asked my mom if I could take a year off, didn't want to go straight to college. And then short after, Dancing with the Stars happened. So that was back in 2006. I was 21 when I moved to Los Angeles, and that was truly only because of Dancing with the Stars. I thought I was doing one season, 26 seasons later.
So did you find out that you got on the show and moved to LA for the show, or vice versa?
Nope, that was it. That was the only reason.
Wow.
But I didn't move here. It was going to be temporary because I still had my dance partner technically, and so I was just going to do one season, and then I was going to go back to my competition world. But that obviously didn't happen.
Wow. That's so awesome. And that was was your first season, the second season of
Yeah.
Dancing with the Stars?
Yeah.
So cool. I have to say, when I think about that show, when anybody brings up Dancing with the Stars, it's, your name is the name that I think most people think of.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, I
That
mean,
short
and
bob
I think
haircut that my coach decided. I had long locks to my butt, and then he decided before one of these bigger competitions, before I even knew I was doing Dancing with the Stars, he goes, "What if we just cut you a new look?" And I was like, "Okay." And then I turn around and it's all gone. My hair will never grow back again. But though it was probably a blessing, because I definitely could pick me out from a crowd, that's for sure, with that hairstyle.
signature style. I mean, that sassy bob will go down
It only looked good in
history.
movement, though. If I was sitting
really
here
did.
doing an interview with you with that same hair, it just would be constantly me twitching, because like you could never figure out like where it should go, the hair, I'm saying, though it looks great in movement.
Well, it did. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, talking about that time, you say, that's when you started drinking.
Yes.
Right away, you have your first drink and everything. What was that like? Were you immediately at a place of numbing out, or do you feel like you were drinking like a normal person?
Oh, no, I don't know what that was because I never drank before. So, like, for me, it was the right into the paparazzi of it all. I am naturally, I'd like to say, an introvert. I'm more on the sensitive side as far as sensitive people go, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say, I mean, look, I had no identity. I came from the ballroom industry, which is a man's world. And never once have I been asked my opinion. I was a follower, not a leader. That was made very clear. And I came here to Los Angeles. I had a different voice. I almost had a borderline English accent. I don't know why, or I think that came from my dance coach maybe, but I was a chameleon, and not in a good way. I adapted to the people I was around. I became them, and instead of becoming me, I needed guidance, and I didn't really have so much as far as guiding me to be me, pushing me to find out who that is. Never, not once. Nor was it like, I don't want people thinking, where was your parents? Like, they did the best they could at that time, and that's it. And I'm grateful for them, because I wouldn't be sitting here with you today. Right. So there's really there's that. But then there's also the fact that I just didn't have a voice. I remember being asked my favorite color, couldn't answer the question. I remember I needed to drink in order to do an interview. This is what the start of it was, because I couldn't, I would try my hardest to speak up and speak, from my stomach and from my diaphragm. And there was none of that. I sounded like an English accent lost person who just had no identity, couldn't put two words together because I got so nervous that I remember drinking once, and we all went out, the cast and the producers, and then all of a sudden I couldn't stop talking, and I was like, oh, this is what I need in order to survive here in this world. And that's what I did.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so did you have certain rules for yourself? Like, what type of drinker were you? Was it around the clock, or was it just social?
I mean, it ended up being that way. And but I was a functioning drunk. So no one knew whenever I was, let's say, drunk. But I was also, I would like to say, a recovering control freak. I never got to the point. I don't think I've ever blacked out to where I don't remember anything. So there was that could have saved my life. However, it was the first rule was my dad. My dad always was like, you can't talk to me before 5 p.m. until I start drinking, which is not till 5 p.m. So I adapted that. That quickly went away. And then it was weekends only. Don't drink by myself. It all went out the door quick. And until my dad passed away, and all of a sudden I broke out into hives when I would smell alcohol. So could you say that the main reason for me quitting was for vanity reasons? Maybe. However, I also knew that because I wasn't reacting to the alcohol like I wanted to, and no longer numb, no matter how much I drank, it would have been a slippery slope if I had continued. And I had just gotten engaged as well. So there was all of that was happening at the same year my dad died.
Wow. That saying that we have that says it works until it doesn't,
Yes.
and some of us, including myself, continue just to bang our heads against the wall, doing the same thing over and over and over, even when it's not
Or when you
working.
try something
And
different because you're like,
yeah,
I need something else because it doesn't work.
yes, yes, absolutely. And so, it's so interesting that in our 12-step literature, it talks about, for those of us
Yeah.
who participate in 12 steps, it literally talks about comparing alcohol to the allergy, where someone were to break out in hives, and here you actually developed an
Yes.
allergy where that happened to you.
Well, yeah, it was the
And
poison being, my
yeah,
body was rejecting the poison. Like, actually, there
yeah,
was nothing I could have done.
what a blessing in disguise.
Yes.
We talk about the gift of desperation, and desperation comes in all forms. And,
Yeah.
I think, the desperation to survive is
Yes.
what can, drive us,
Yeah.
and definitely did in your case. And so what was it that when you made that decision, what were the steps that you took?
Well, I didn't want to tell anybody because I think when I put pressure on, I just know that when I announce it, then the more I'm going to break it because of self-sabotage. So I
Mm-hmm.
made a promise to myself. I don't think I had gone by the time I was thinking and toying with this decision of just not drinking. I remember thinking, I don't remember the last time I went 1 day without, or 2 days without drinking. There was
Mm.
no way. And so I was like, let me just take this day by, like, literally, I didn't even tell my fiance at the time, who was already living with me in my home. It was honestly just something that I kept to myself. And then after a month or two, then I told my fiance.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I've had to quit other things, smoking stuff, and same tactic. I totally get
Yeah.
the idea
Right?
of
Isn't
like
that
needing that to
weird
be your, yeah, yeah,
how that
because you don't want to jinx
works?
it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. And congratulations. When is your sobriety birthday?
It is March. So I'm very excited that it'll be coming up
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
March
congratulations on
23rd.
that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, to anybody who's struggling with addiction, any of the things we talked about today, and they've identified with something that you've said, what would be your word of encouragement you would leave with them?
Uh, First of all, there is no sobriety without believing in a higher power. And I have,
Mm,
as much as it has been very difficult, it's not the first thing sometimes when, again, my unconscious comes in and I'm not as present as I'd like to be. I don't necessarily turn to faith or God, right? Right away. Though I do know, though, that I am sober because of my belief in my higher power and knowing that there wouldn't be any of this without it. That is number one. But also for those who get overwhelmed a lot, like I do, when I think
mm,
too far in advance, I need to actually know that this feeling too shall pass, but also that it is literally 1 minute at a time. That's it.
mm.
It's not 1 day because that is fucking overwhelming. A day, 24 hours. That's a full 24 hours. How about just a minute? Like, can you give me a minute? That's it. Can you give yourself a minute? And of course you can, because you are you and you're stuck with you for the rest of your life.
Mm. Amen. Absolutely. Okay, closing out, I've got a few rapid fire questions for
Okay.
you, Dancing with Stars related, if it's
Okay.
okay.
Of course.
Okay, so Peloton's become a huge part of my exercise routine, and I must
Cody
say I've
Rigsby.
joined the masses, becoming a huge fan of the guy. He put a face to the name of
Yeah,
Peloton, in
he
my
did.
opinion. Yep. And he's definitely been an inspiration to me. So I'm so curious about what it was like working with him
No, he's amazing.
as your partner.
He was going
Yeah.
through it with me because that was like the talk of like possibly me ending my marriage and all of this. And he's amazing. He has also struggled in life like we all have, right? And I love and respect a lot of people who have struggled or admit to it at least and have come out the other end. And I think he's a
Yeah.
beautiful person.
Yeah. Me too. Okay. Who was your funniest dance partner in your career?
Funniest. Jack Osborne, surprisingly. He's just so sarcastic and nasty. Yeah, I love him.
Oh, no, that
and
makes
also,
total sense.
also sober as well. Proud of him.
Yep. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Whose skill surprised you the most?
Juan Pablo de Pache. He was freaking amazing, even though we got eliminated. Didn't even make the freaking finale, though. We got 60 out of 60. Who knows?
Wow. Okay. Who was your most difficult partner? If you're comfortable answering that one.
Cat. I can't.
Okay.
I got in trouble the last time I answered that.
Okay. Are you comfortable saying who your favorite of all time was?
Yeah. Emmett Smith, Jack Osborne, Rob Kardashian. There you have it.
Lovely. All right. Last question. Okay. Are you able to tell us what's next on the horizon for you?
Or I can tell you what's next, but not all of it. How about that?
Okay. Yeah.
I have a dance program that's been 10 years in the making called Body Language, which is movement and the therapeutic benefits. It's another resource that we could all add to our resources of, what gets us in a good mood. And it's going to be hopefully dropping and launching 2023. I would like to say the beginning of 2023, though I don't know. So therefore, this has been an amazing, challenging, scary journey because it's never been done as there's a lot of somatic involved. I actually have a somatic practitioner who is signed on with me to do this and has partnered with me, Lindsay Anderson. She studied under Dr. Peter Levine, and there is a lot of science, with movement. And I don't want to say dance because dance is intimidating. And no, you don't need a dance partner. And no, you don't need a lot of space. You literally need just a little tiny space even in the bathroom if you needed to. You need to be by yourself. And it doesn't require music, doesn't require rhythm. It literally requires to learn how, first of all, to want to be better and to want to understand a little bit about our own intelligence and body awareness. Because the first step towards healing is, I believe, awareness, right?
Absolutely. That's so beautiful and so exciting. I wish you the best of luck with that. I can't wait to watch that unfold. And
thanks. And also those my podcast, Burke in the Game. I keep forgetting about that.
Burke, that's right. Burke,
yeah.
Great podcast.
Thanks.
So if you want to connect and follow Cheryl, all things Cheryl Burke, we'll have all those ways that you can connect with her in the show notes below. So please do that. And Cheryl, thank you so much again for being on the show today. I'll close out by saying how I always do, that you're only one decision away from a completely different life, and it is never too late to start loving yourself.
For more information on today's episode, check out the show notes. Recovery Stories is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's Rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098. Or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please share with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. We are grateful for you and hope that you have been encouraged by today's episode. As always, remember you are only one decision away from a completely different life, and it is never too late to start loving yourself.